Christmas and Easter, 2 days esteemed above most others and are observed by nearly 1/3 of the human population. Millions of believers worldwide celebrate these holidays to honor the birth, death, and resurrection of the Messiah. These festivals take many cultural forms and shapes around the world. But would you be alarmed to discover that these two seemingly innocent holidays are historically rooted in ancient occult practices which can be traced back to Babylon? Babylonian sun god worship has evolved throughout the centuries and has branched out into several major religions. Many professing believers have also adopted several of these pagan customs unaware. Even today, all throughout Catholicism and daughter denominations, there are still dozens of popular monuments and symbols that were at one time dedicated to various sun gods. What became this very same organization also instituted Christmas and Easter. Secular and Christian scholars alike all record that the Christmas tree, wreaths, boughs of holly, and mistletoe were all objects used in pagan sun god fertility rites. This, of course, begs the question, what are they doing in the homes of believers today? Discover how Mithra and the Norse Odin evolved into the imaginary saint we know today as Nicholas, and how he became the key figure in the celebration of Christmas. In ancient folklore, Saint Nicholas was accompanied by a dark counterpart known as the Krampus and had a striking resemblance to other false deities. The Easter Bunny and the dyeing of Easter eggs are also symbols of fertility connected to Ishtar, biblically referenced as the Queen of Heaven. Long before the birth of our Messiah, December 25th was a day used to celebrate the rebirth of the sun god. All of this and more has all been justified by man for hundreds of years. But when was the last time we considered what our Creator had to say regarding all of this? Do we care? Should we care? We reveal an opportunity and faith-centered challenge to worship and practice the faith as He stated He desires for all His people, not according to us, not according to men, but instead according to His way, according to His word. That is, if you are ready to test everything.
When you read the story of the church in Acts, all the way through Acts, it's a Jewish church. And everything is sort of underpinned by their Hebraic mindset, you know, the way that they thought. When that generation died out, the next generation from like the latter part of the first century, the second century, the sort of the reins of the church then pass over to the Gentiles. And the Gentile leaders at that time were coming from the Gentile world, which was a world that was infiltrated by Greek philosophy. What they didn't realise was what they ended up with was such a sort of a mixture of pagan and biblical that that Christianity from that point onwards was infiltrated by these strange ideas that got into the faith.
And so some early Christians want to throw away the Old Testament, just use the Gospel of Luke and Acts and a bit of Paul, and want to move Christianity to a much more pagan and Hellenistic friendly world, which is not rooted in the Old Testament.
Okay, this is David, who says, we have friends who do not celebrate Christmas because they say December 25th is really a pagan holiday. While I agree that Jesus may not have been born on December 25th, he certainly was born as described in the Bible. How do I respond to them?
Well, in a sense, tell them they're right. You see, the winter solstice a couple of days later was the shortest day of the year, and the pagans had something called Saturnalia. And it was a time of lawlessness because all the laws were suspended. And people, a bunch of singers who actually wandered the streets naked singing. And then they had orgies, sexual orgies. It was a mass thing. Well, when the Catholic Church came along in Italy, the Romans and others didn't want to give up their holidays, so they said, okay, we'll Christianize it. And so they said, okay, we'll say the birth of Jesus was the 25th of December. All this business about mistletoe, pagan. Christmas trees, pagan. Giving out gifts, pagan. Every bit of it is pagan. Every single bit of it is pagan. We've Christianized it all. And so that's good. And so we have time, we celebrate for Jesus. Everybody gets all misty-eyed. But the truth is, they're all pagan. But the birth of
Jesus. But the intent of the heart is what it's about.
Exactly. So we have Christianized all these things. We give gifts in the name of Jesus. We celebrate his birthday. And it's a nice thing. And so I'm very delighted. And I like Christmas. I like all the decorations. The Founder's Inn is just loaded with decorations. It's very pretty. But pagan.
But all to celebrate Jesus.
Yeah, but Christianized pagan. All right.
That's exactly how we ended up with Christmas. Read a few scriptures, throw some Santa Claus in there, and voila, we got the birth of Jesus Christ, because we've added Bible to a pagan ritual.
I am a polytheist, which means that I venerate many gods. And my particular denomination, if you will, of polytheism is what is called heathenry, which is the worship of the Norse gods, Odin, Loki, Freya, Frigga, et al. The idea of Christmas being December 25th. That's the winter solstice time. So on the winter solstice, we would sacrifice to Odin, and on the summer solstice to Frey. You've heard of the 12 days of Christmas? Well, those were the 12 days of the ritual sacrifices. They were intercalendar days. And you do your sacrifices, you do your celebrations. You may be burning a Yule log. I would certainly encourage people to decorate their trees, to make offerings. There's this decorating of the tree to honor the spirits, decorating the trees to honor the gods. And the whole idea of bringing things like holly inside, it's an evergreen. It represents this promise that the sun is going to return. We have mistletoe and holly and trees as part of our Christmas celebrations. None of them have anything to do with the Christmas story. And in fact, in early New England, in the States, up through, I believe, the early 19th century, it was illegal in many places in the U.S. to have Christmas trees, specifically because it was a pagan custom.
Puritans hated Christmas. They called it Fool's Tide. And they hated it for a variety of reasons. But the major reason they hated it was wrong. It was a lie. There's no evidence that Jesus of Nazareth was born on December 25th. There's every bit of evidence he was born in late September, early October. So December 25th is just a lie. It's just not historically true. It was celebrated by the Roman Church because of it being a pagan holiday. And after parts of Europe became Christian, people still wanted to celebrate December 25th because it had been a good time. And so much of the Roman Church said, okay, well, we'll let this holiday go on, but we'll call it Christ's birthday. So Puritans would say, but you're celebrating a pagan symbol, and you're doing it on a day when Christ wasn't born. You're lying to people.
And one of the things that all of the Christian missionaries inevitably railed about is they decorate trees and they make offerings at the trees. It was too deeply ensconced in the minds of the people as an important religious holiday, so you steal it. During the Christianization of England and of Northern Europe, I believe it was Pope Gregory the Great, he issued an edict that encouraged his missionaries to incorporate elements of the pagan holidays. Build your churches on holy sites. This will make co-opting the hearts and minds of the people easier. It'll make the transition to Christianity easier.
During the Reformation, most of the people who broke away from the Catholic Church broke away from Christmas, though famously the Anglican Church in England did not. The Anglican Church in England continued to celebrate Christmas. That's another reason why the Puritans hated Anglicans. They thought they were sellouts. They call themselves Protestants, but they still celebrate Christmas. Puritans forbade it. It was actually illegal in New England. A law of 1659 made it illegal. When England kind of made the Puritan world join the British Empire, they had to relax the law. But through the American Revolution, the better sort in New England never celebrated Christmas. It was the sort of thing that ruffians did and the lower orders did, people who were not well behaved. And I think down until around 1850, kids went to school on Christmas Day. It really is, it becomes a big holiday in that area of the colonies, in the second half of the 19th century. So it's pretty recent. I'm a big Christmas guy. I like to get presents and give them. I have 3 daughters I buy, but the Puritans were right. It was a phony. It was not a real holiday. And they punished people. What they usually did on Christmas was work extra hard to show their contempt for it as a holiday. But by the mid-19th century, there was no holding back the fact that young people liked it. It was fun. It became a good time. A lot of things evolved that way. It's hard to put the genie back in the bottle sometimes. And the truth is, the more Christmas was celebrated in the 19th century, the more people wanted to.
I'm done. I was like, we're shutting it down. Like that meme of the Jewish guy on the radio, and he's like, shut it down. Let's shut it down. Christmas is going down. Boom. And then Christmas comes and you're like, I just want to sing the songs.
I just don't share their abhorrence of Christmas. I just see that it's a time to get people who are I understand we don't know when Christ was born, that he was probably born in the fall, that he was probably born when it was Sukkot, that he was not born on December 25th, that December 25th is a pagan holiday that goes back to the Roman Saturnalia. I know all that, but in my experience, coming from a broken home, Christmas the one day when there was peace, when my mom and dad might be under the roof for the few hours, you know. So Christmas to me was like, lay down your weapons, peace on earth, you know, goodwill towards men for a few hours. That's what Christmas meant to me. Not that I was offending God because it was a pagan holiday. It was because of Jesus, we could have peace with other people.
I've heard so many times all my life, you know, just worship God your own way. Well, where's that in the Bible? As far as I can tell, we're supposed to worship him his way, you know, and it sounds good. Worship him how you want to do it, and it sounds great. It sounds inviting, but it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right, you know, so lots to think about.
So the pastor gets up there and he goes, I can answer any question about the Christmas story that you want me to answer. And it was without a split-second notion. My wife's hand goes straight up in the air. And as soon as she did, I sink down in my pew. My wife immediately looks at him and says,
we're, you know, telling our children that Santa Claus is real, and, you know, why are we lying to all of our children? And all that he could say is, well, we can talk about this later. That's exactly what he said. He said, how about we just discuss this after the service, Heather? And I was thinking, oh no. Well, then not only that, I mean, there was a deacon's child, you know, look at her father right in the middle of service and say, you know, is she really telling the truth? Is Santa Claus really not real? And his response to that, I mean, I can't believe that he would even say that. I mean. Yeah, he told her, he said, well, if she told you that Jesus wasn't real, would you believe her? And the little girl says, no. And the deacon looked at his daughter and said, well, that's the same thing with Santa Claus.
After Constantine in the early 4th century, you then get a bit of a struggle. Should the empire go back to paganism or not? But eventually the establishment of a Christian culture, which means that a lot of the dates of the pagan world are baptized. Not only the buildings are baptized, but a lot of the festivals get baptized and being given a direction and a significance to say to the Christian populace, well, actually, we're not celebrating Midwinter Festival on the 25th. We're actually celebrating the incarnation at the most dark and cold part of the year.
Suddenly, the whole of the Roman Empire had to become Christian. So one day they were pagan, worshipping the sun god. The next day they were Christian, worshipping the Son of God.
You know, someone could say, well, the name Easter comes from a pagan Anglo-Saxon god of the spring, and you say, yes, that's absolutely true. How long does it take for a festival to become authentically Christian? Let's say, for the sake of argument, that I wouldn't say it's Constantine, because these things are in play before Constantine, but let's say that the reason Easter is a spring festival is because of pagan spring festivals. Okay, so let's say the first year that takes place, people are like, oh, this is fun, this is familiar, I kind of remember this from when I was a pagan, now I'm a Christian. Let's fast forward 20 years. Do people still have that association? 40 years, 60 years.
You have Easter at a time when we would be celebrating the spring equinox. What we see with Easter / Ostara is the survival of symbolism. Like, why do we do Easter egg hunts at Easter? That has nothing to do with the story of Christ's resurrection, but it has everything to do with blessing the land and honoring its fertility and the growth of spring. The goddess Ostara, or Aostre to give her Anglo-Saxon name, her symbol was the rabbit and the egg, because the egg is fertility, its potentiality. I don't remember anything about rabbits or eggs in the Bible, but some of these symbols, because they were important to folk practices, just survived.
There is some historical significance to Easter, however, because of the fact that it falls on Passover, and Jesus died on Good Friday and was resurrected on Easter Sunday.
And this is what really got me, because I was instrumental in starting the drama ministry in my church, and I would write, direct, and produce and play Jesus in Passion plays on Good Friday and Easter Sunday. But yet Yeshua says to the Pharisees, they demand a sign. He says, the only sign that's going to be given to you is a sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so also the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth. Well, 3 days, 3 nights, that's 72 hours. How do you get 72 hours from Friday to Sunday? That's like seriously fuzzy core math right there. You can't make that happen, and yet that's the only sign that would prove that he was who he said he was. So here I am playing Jesus on the cross, not realizing that I'm actually denying the only sign that he said that would be given, because there's no 72 hours of 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth doing that thing.
There's so many things that we don't realize are in the Bible that once we open them up and we look at things from just a different perspective than what we were taught by mainstream, church doctrine, so many other things come alive to us. And so when we go back to the New Testament and we realize that the disciples kept the feast, that our Messiah kept the feast, that Jesus kept the feast, it really begs the question, now why don't we do it?
It started off with the church fathers. They would stop Christians from meeting up with their Jewish neighbours. They would certainly ban anyone from doing anything like Passovers and instead of Easter. The Sabbath was moved from Saturday to Sunday. It was all subtle things in order to sort of move the church as further and further away from its Jewish roots, and to divorce anything, from the true origins.
There's a very famous Christian priest who became Bishop of Constantinople named John Chrysostom, the Golden Mouth, because he was such a eloquent orator.
This priest delivers a series of sermons telling his Christian congregants, stop participating in Jewish festivals, stop going to the synagogue, stop going to that part of town. There has to be a clear boundary.
His target isn't so much the Jews, it's Christians who are worshiping with the Jews and celebrating holidays with the Jews and going to Jewish synagogues.
You start reading about the Sabbath, and it's like, really Sabbath and feast, you see words like forever, everlasting, perpetual in all your generations, you know, not, well, until my son comes and then it's going to stop and we're going to change everything to, you know, Sunday, Christmas, and Easter.
We tried to tell the pastor, okay, I think we need to celebrate Passover. He was, oh, that's really good. And we had a meeting here and we started talking about what we were going to have. And he goes, okay, and then we could have Easter ham as well, because a lot of people don't like, I was like, a lot of people may not like lamb. And at that point, but we're looking at each other, and in our minds, we're thinking, okay, this isn't going to work.